Okay, so here's going to be the project for our messenger bag. I was looking on the internet and I got inspired by this site called Noodlehead, and I'm just going to scroll, just help you see the address of the individual who created this tutorial. So this is a messenger bag from cargo pants, and our question was, want to make one of these? And my answer is yes, I do. So this is the picture that kind of caught my interest. As you can see, it's got a really cool kind of front pocket that's been repurposed from the side leg part of the cargo pants, and they've got a bias tape on here, and there's another kind of fabric, a nice blue fabric for the lining of the handles. And here's another variation of it, done like a blue denim with a little bit of a brown trim. And over here they've just used web cording instead of making their own straps. And there's the inside of the bag. And so there's her project beginning with a pair of cargo pants, a list of instructions, sizes of pieces to cut out, and a really great step-by-step. Really recommend you read through this very carefully. The only thing I might change is the way the handles are made. She tells you to go to another site where she made some handles and to do it that way. I really like a different method for making handles, but hers definitely will work. Also, she made her own bias tape. You could do that or buy your own. I think making your own makes a lot of sense. It's cheap and it's easy to do. And so if you go to the website and read through here and get inspired, that would be a really great way to begin the project, and then you'll be ready for my next part of the video. Okay, so here are the pair of cargo pants I'm going to be using. Just a kind of khaki colored pair of cargo pants. They caught my eye because I really liked that it had a pocket and that I can use for the front, but also that it had a zipper. And I like the fact that it'll be really secure. And I think I'm even going to see if I can make use of this other pocket on the other side for the back of my bag. So I'm gonna see if that's gonna work out. I ended up picking up a large pair. There's a large pair of men's cargo pants, and because I didn't have any, neither did my husband, I just bought it at Value Village for $8.99. So at this point it would be really good to go and launder it, and that way it's nice and clean and easy to work with. Okay, so I have washed and dried my cargo pants, and now it's time to get down to work. When I went shopping for them though, I did make a template of what the pattern called for, especially for the front flap piece. They said that they wanted 10 by 13 inches, so 10 inches wide and 13 inches tall. So I drew this pattern piece out and I took it with me shopping just to make sure that whatever I was choosing was going to have enough space for that front flap. And the other thing that I did is I noted that the bottom of the bag was cut for 2.5 inches wide. So I made a dotted line along the top of my pattern piece, because if it's 2.5 inches wide on the bottom, it's going to be 2.5 inches wide on the top, and it'll kind of fold like this. And then hang down. So I want to make sure that the pocket falls below this and there's enough fabric above it too. So I checked it out and I do have enough. So what I'm going to do is lay this down and I'm going to trace around. So I've laid out my pair of cargo pants and I've laid my pattern piece down, and I've used a marker that just removes with a little bit of heat. You can use a regular pen though. The only thing that was really nice about this is I traced around, and if I didn't like my placement, I could just take an iron and pass it over top and move this and try tracing it out again. I'm really happy with the placement of this piece. I made sure that it kind of fell below that dotted line that I spoke of earlier, and I traced it all the way out. And so I don't know if you can see it here, but there's the purple line, and I'm going to cut with a pair of scissors. I'm going to cut that section out, and I'm going to have my front flap piece. Okay, So I traced it out, as I mentioned before, and now I'm just going to use my scissors, and I made a small little snip right here in the corner of the curve, and I'm just going to carefully cut all the way around. I've already done this side of it. I just wanted to mention to you to be really careful, because you never know what you're going to need. And the other thing is, some pockets will have a loose piece of fabric that'll hang down, and you don't want to cut that. But if you do, you can always just put it on your sewing machine and close up that cut. But it would be a real shame to cut off a pocket you want to use. So I'm just going to carefully cut. And careful cutting makes a project a lot easier. It's easier to match your pieces up if you cut really carefully. And also it allows you to cut the other pieces from fabric that you didn't ruin. Like, for example, if I just cut straight across here and then I ended up needing a piece in here, I would have ruined that piece of fabric. If your pants are really wrinkled after you wash them, you want to make sure to take it to the ironing table and give it a good press so that you're cutting fabric that's lying flat. So there you go. So I have my piece of fabric that matches up with my pattern piece. So there's my front flap, ready to go. So we're getting ready to cut the back and front pieces. This is a piece that's going to sit underneath the front flap and on the back of my messenger bag. So I'm going to try to make use of this pocket on the back piece of my bag. I think that'll be really cool. So I'm going to take a pattern piece that I have cut a piece of paper, but you don't have to cut a piece of paper. You can just measure it out. But I think that this is really nice because I'm going to use it for placement to make sure I get that pocket where I want it. And that piece of paper is 5.5 inches wide and 11.5 inches tall. And since I'm going to use it for the front and the back of my bag, I'm going to need to cut 2 of them out from my fabric of my cargo pants. So I'm cutting out the front and back pieces. I've laid it out over top of the pocket that I want to try to save and use in the front or back. I haven't decided. So I centered it. I really like the fact that the seam is running exactly in the middle. And so I trace it out again with that marker that disappears with heat, but again you can use a pencil or you can use a pen, but it's just, if you use a pencil you'll have to wash it, and if you use a pen it won't come out. This way, if I make a mistake, I don't like the placement, I can remove it. So my pattern piece disappears and you can see the purple line, and I'm again going to take my pair of scissors and I'm going to make sure I'm only picking up 1 layer of my fabric. And I'm going to make a little snip to get going in here. Real careful. Put my scissors in, and I'm going to cut this one out just as carefully as I did the front piece. Again, careful cutting makes it easier to match all your pieces up. And I'm just going to keep on going until I go all the way around. So I've cut the front flap. I've got my back piece for the bag, and now I need the part of the front piece, so because I needed 2 of those and I need 1 of these, so I'm cutting out the second one of that one, and I'm just going to use this pant leg. Now on this side of it I had some stains that they didn't launder out, so I'm going to cut up along the seam, and I'm just going to lay this out flat. And again, I've been centering my seams because these pockets happen to be on the side of the pants. So I'm just going to do the same thing, and I'm going to center my seam here as well with the middle of my bag, lining it up and making sure that's in the center. And again, I'm just going to trace around my pattern piece, and that pattern piece is 10.5 wide by 11.5 tall or high. And once I'm done tracing it, I'm going to cut it out, and I will have the 2 pieces for the exterior of the bag out of the same fabric. And I'll end up doing the same, like I'll need to cut 2 more of the same size as this out of the interior bag color. So that'll be a different fabric, and I'm thinking I probably will want to use this fabric, so I'm going to get that ready to go. I'm going to pre-wash it and make sure that it's washed and dried so that it does any shrinking it needs to do. Okay, so I've cut out one flap piece, 2 pieces for the front and back out of my cargo pants, and I've cut one bottom piece, which was 2.5 by, I think it's the bottom piece is 2.5 inches wide by 11 long. And then I've got 2 pieces out of the cargo pants, 1 and 2, and these are for the sides, and these are 12 inches by 2.5 inches long. So these are all the pieces I need for the body of the bag. So now what I need is my straps. Now I'd like my straps out of the same material, so I'm going to make use of the material that's left over from my pants. If you're working with shorts, you can still do this, but you'd have to piece them together. I'm going to measure out as many 2.5-inch strips of fabric as I can and cut them, and then I'm going to attach them. So I'm going to go through and measure them, and then I'm going to cut them into strips. So I'm going to start from this seam, and that's 2.5, and I can mark it and cut with my scissors, or I could use a rotary cutter if I feel confident using a rotary cutter. And I'm going to move this over, and then from that marking I'm going to measure 2.5 as well, keeping my fabric as straight as I can. And then from that marking, I'm going to measure over 2.5. You can do this with a tape measure as well, but if you have a ruler, obviously, they're really great. It'll save you some time. Not necessary. Just make sure that you measure carefully. And I'm going to start cutting the strips that I've got so far, and I'll make use of as much material as I can. Okay, so we're ready to cut the fabric pieces for the lining of the bag. You can purchase some fabric from your local fabric store. I was at Walmart buying some groceries, so I just picked up these little pre-cut squares. I bought 2 that were 18 by 21, and if you do what I did and buy an 18 by 21, I'm just going to show you how to cut it so that you can get the most out of it and not a lot of waste. So what I did was I cut the front pieces. I cut one from here and then one from there, had very little waste down the one side, and then I cut the 2 long pieces for the sides. I cut one here and one there, and then I had very little waste along the bottom. I have this square that was left over, and it wasn't quite long enough to cut the bottom piece. So what I did, because I'm kind of frugal like this, is I ended up cutting 2 strips and I just pieced them together, and I'll show you what that looks like. Right here I just cut 2 strips that were 2.5, and then after I just sewed them together with a little 1/4-inch seam, pressed it open and flat, and now I've got it cut to length, and so as you can see, that's the right size. So that's how many pieces I was able to get out of the one piece. So the only thing I have left to cut is the fabric for the flap, and this is the fabric for the flap, and I want to cut the bias strips. I had enough fabric from the pants of my cargo pants after I cut out the exterior pieces to cut enough fabric to do both sides of my strap, but if you want to do one side in a contrasting fabric, you're going to need to pick up some more fabric than I did. But okay, so this is how I'm going to get the most out of this one. I'm going to cut this piece from the side, and I'm just going to line it up, and I'm going to trace that out and cut it out. And then after, I'm going to show you how to make use of the rest of the fabric so that we can cut bias strips. Alright, so I traced it out, cut it out, and so here it is. So I've got the lining piece for the inside flap. So now I've got all of my interior lining pieces. So just to show you those again. So I've got the flap, the front and back of the bag. There's front and the back. And I've got the bottom. And I've got the two side pieces. So those are all my lining pieces. So the only thing I need now is I need those bias strips. Again, you can purchase bias at the store, but you can make it. It's really, really simple and easy, and I think that it's really nice when you can get the exact fabric that you're using on your project. So this is what you're going to need to do. So this is what I have left over from that fabric I purchased. And I'm going to cut my bias strip from here. But what you're going to need to really do your bias strips well is you're going to need to straighten your fabric. Now you could have done this right in the beginning, but I didn't, so I'm going to do it now. You can take a little snip and you can rip along it, and it will tear completely straight, and then you can go and press that down because it'll ripple a little bit. And then I also did the same thing to this side, so it's completely straight on that side as well. So what I have is a 90-degree angle, but it's actually true to the fabric, and that's really important because the grains of the fabric are running this way and running this way, and we want to cut on a 45-degree angle. We want to cut these strips at a 45-degree angle, and that's called the bias. When you get fabric from the store, we assume that it's cut straight, but a lot of times actually it isn't. So you can see if I line it up with the grid on my table, and again I need to press that down because it's a bit ripply here. It doesn't exactly line up with the bottom of my my cutting table here. Actually, it's not bad. I've seen worse. But we do want a true bias, so that would be the best way to get that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to press it, and I'm also going to cut that little bit off so we can end up with exactly a 90-degree angle, and then we'll continue from there. Before I press this, I should have told to you a little bit about other ways to find the true straight edge of the fabric. The salvage edges that come with your fabric, they're seen to be true, and that's why a lot of pattern pieces, they'll have markings that you run parallel to that salvage edge. But another way that you can do it, one of them is, as I showed you, you can tear it along it, and that works really well with light fabrics, but that doesn't work with all fabrics. You could also, see how it's fraying along the one side here? You can get it so that it no longer frays in pieces, so that it basically you're able to pull one thread, and then everything past that thread has been taken off, and you have one continuous thread line to the very bottom. I'm almost there on this one, so I'm just going to finish taking that up. Okay. There you go. There you go. So right now, it doesn't look quite even because there's still all these fringes on the edges, but I can trim that off, and what I've got is one thread that's running all the way down from one edge of my fabric to the other. So this is a perfectly straight edge with the fabric, and it's true. So I've got that straight edge, this one which I tore, which I still have to press, this edge and this one as well. So this is a complete, perfect, square, true piece of fabric, and it's going to be perfect for starting my bias cut. So I just wanted to show you that. Sometimes you can even take a single thread, if it's a stiffer fabric, and pull it, bunching and pulling that single thread out all the way along until you remove it, and you're able to see where that one thread is missing, and then you can carefully go along and trim along that missing line and then remove the excess. So those are all different ways of finding the true edge. Okay, so we're going to cut on the bias, and I'm just going to show you the book because I'm going to give you a photocopy of this page as well, just to help you remember. But it says, cutting on the bias. Cutting strips on the bias helps you easily bind the edge of curved pieces, such as a flap of a bag. And that's what we're going to be doing. And this is because fabric cut on a 45-degree angle has a bit of stretch. So that's why we're cutting it on a 45. So the first thing they do is they've got their strip of fabric, and to cut it on the bias, they begin by folding up a corner on the diagonal, and then they trim it off. Okay, so that gives them the 45, and then they fold the fabric on this newly cut edge, and then using a rotary cutter, they cut strips to the specified width, which for us is going to be 2.5, according to the project instructions. Cut however many strips it will take to go around the piece that you are binding. And we're going to need approximately, I think it's 39 or so inches to do the whole project. And maybe it's good to cut 45 just so that, 40, so that we have lots extra. And then what we're going to do is we're going to attach them. It says place the ends of the strips together at a 90-degree angle, and we're going to piece the strips right sides together, right, pretty sides together, and we're going to sew them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's begin. So we're taking our fabric and laying it down with the wrong side facing up, and I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to fold it like that. I'm just going to finger press this down here, and that is going to give me that first piece that I need, and I'm going to cut along this fold. Now that's going to be hard for you to see, the fold, but I can see it. Right from one end to the other. So I've trimmed that off just like the instructions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the fold of the fabric along this newly cut edge. So we're going to fold the fabric along this newly cut edge and line up that cut line. Now I could actually cut 2.5 inch strips going like this. The reason why I'm folding it is just so that it kind of saves a little bit of time. And if I'm dealing with a really large piece of fabric, it makes it so it's small enough that I can handle it easily with my ruler. Now it's really quick and easy if you have a rotary cutter like this one. But if you don't, you can still do it with scissors. So I'm going to do with scissors so that you can see that that's completely doable. Okay? So along this edge, I'm going to lay my ruler, or you could use your tape measure. And I'm just going to mark off here 2.5 inches. So there's 2 inches and a half. And I'm just going to mark along this edge. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to move it over 2.5 inches again on that line that I've just done. And I'm going to make another marking. Move it over again 2.5 inches. I'm going to make another marking. Move it over 2.5 inches. Make another marking. And then I'm going to cut along those. I'm also going to make use of this piece because there's no reason to waste it. It's also cut on a 45-degree angle along here. So I'm going to measure 2.5 inches, and I'm going to draw a line. I could fold this as well. If I was using a rotary cutter, that would make it much quicker work. Moving it up, right along this, that's where the line was. So this is 2.5 inches, and I'm going to draw another line. Okay, so now I'm going to cut it with my scissors because I want to show you that you can do just as easily with your scissors as you can with a rotary cutter. Just really carefully cut along those marked lines. So that's one strip. And I just continue in this way until they're all cut. When I'm dealing with these ones here, it's probably best to start on that folded edge and cut very carefully not to slide your fabric. Okay, and just continue cutting them till they're all cut. Okay, so I finished cutting all of the strips, and I just laying them end to end, matching up the angles of the cuts, as you can see. And I measured it out, and I'm going to have more than enough. On the pieces that I cut from that other, from the first piece that I cut off, the angle was wrong, so it wouldn't connect up with the rest of them. So I just cut at the same angle. I just cut that piece off, so now it fits with the rest of them. So I want to talk to you about joining them up. So I've got them laid out here, and you can see that I'm going to want the pretty sides together. And what I'm going to do is I want you to imagine you're going to be taking this, and I'm going to deal with one piece at a time. And so you saw when I picked it up and brought it, oh, it's out of the camera shot. So let me do that for you again. So you can see that they're matching up. The two cut lines are matching up, and their pretty sides are here. So if I were to kind of bring those pretty sides together, lining them up, and I were to pick up this piece, you can see that the fabric crosses over at a 45-degree angle. And that's how we're going to sew it, is we're going to overlap them at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to sew from this point all the way down to the other point, and that's going to be 1/4 inch, and then that's going to join all above my pieces, and I'm going to do them all that way. Okay, so after lining them all up, I've pinned them all together. As you can see, I've pinned them. They're, again, pretty sides together at a right angle, and there's just a little overlap on both corners, and that's because I'm going to sew from that point across 1/4 inch to this point, right along that edge. And so I've got them all together, one long strip, all pretty sides together, all pinned, ready to go. And really you can do all of this, you know, work ahead of time, and now we're ready just to go on the sewing machine and piece this piece together. Okay, so I'm going to start sewing my bias strips together. So I've got it on a straight stitch, regular size, about 2.5. My needle position is in the center, and I'm going to make sure that the needle is coming down right where that junction point is. I'm going to lower my presser foot, and I'm going to hold on to the tail threads that are hanging out the back, and I'm very carefully going to begin stitching, reverse stitch, go forward again, and I've got it so 1/4 inch is from the needle position to the outer edge of my foot, so it's really easy for me to keep that all in the line. I'm just going to remove those pins as I go. And when I remove a pin, I like to do it when the needle is in the down position. I'm ending again right where the junction of those two fabrics meet, that point. And I'm just going to reverse and then raise my presser foot. I'm going to pull it out, cut it off. And so you can see that there's a little string hanging there. Okay, so you can see that I've sewn from one junction point all the way along to the other junction point. And so if I were to open that up, I've now got one long strip. So I'm going to keep doing that to all my pieces, to all of them that I've pinned together. And then I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and I'm going to lay it down like this, and I'm going to press it to one side first, and then I'm going to press it to the other side, and then I'm going to open it and press it flat. Right now I'm having a hard time opening it up there, and I'm going to open it like this and press it flat. And that'll get me my bias strips.